Welcome to the daily reports of the History IB News. My name is Rolfo Santos, and for today I have an exciting report about the Second Sino-Japanese War. This report is going to be based on interviews with Mr. James Sawyer, a former general from the military in the United States of America. Also, a former Chinese minister, Mr. Xiang PP, and other exciting interviews. Enjoy. In what way the USA was involved in this conflict?
Our army was never in actual war in the Second Sino-Japanese War. We were supportive with China, but we wanted to maintain our open door policy to sell our products in China. But also we wanted to show our displeasure we had with Japan, but not to the point which Japan would stop American products coming to the Asian market. America didn't want Japan to reach our major regional colony, which was the Philippines. But we did wanted to show our displeasure of the Japan with the aggression in Manchuria.
What measures did USA took in the Second Sino-Japanese War?
The initial response we had was to prohibit the shipment of weapons to either China or Japan. This was a bad call from our country since we actually wanted to help China, but most of the Japanese weapons were produced by themselves. So this really just affected China because they couldn't produce their own guns, meanwhile Japan did. Then we had a chance to put an oil embargo on Japan since we were the world's largest producer of oil in the world, and Japan relied on us for all the effects of war, including industries and ships.
How did USA support China?
In February 1938, USA lended China $25 million and then remained relatively uninvolved in the conflict until Japan started moving territories outside China in 1940.
Thanks. Hello and good morning, Mr. Heinrich Vortanten. Would you mind to tell us who did Germany support during the Second Sino-Japanese War?
Good morning. Germany supported the Chiang Kai-shek government, which was the leader of the anti-communist government.
In what ways did you help China fought the war?
Germany supported China in many different ways, but it was mainly through military advisors, and Germany also supplied 80% of all weapons used by China's army.
Finally, what did Japan and Germany agree on?
Both nations, Japan and Germany, agreed to oppose communism in the Anti-Comintern Pact.
Thank you. Hello and good evening, Mr. Xiang PP. First question, what was the Oihara King Dichon Agreement?
Hello. It was an agreement in which China had to remove all of its troops from the Manchukuo border. This agreement was signed since us, the Chinese, were more preoccupied on destroying China's Communist parties.
What was China's situation back in 1937 then?
We had lost control of almost all northern China. Japan was either directly or indirectly managing states, that so-called puppet state.
What were the consequences of Japan controlling these territories?
By the end of 1936, Chiang Kai-shek policy of opposing the CCP rather than Japan was not very popular with the Chinese citizens. This then obligated Chiang to negotiate with the CCP to create an anti-Japanese front.
What was the Marco Polo Bridge incident?
The Marco Polo Bridge incident was a briefly fought war between Japan and China, but Chiang Kai-shek's government decided that they were no possibility of winning, so they decided to use aircraft to destroy all the Japanese military camps. In this moment, the war was official.
What happened after this incident?
Japan started to conquer all of our provinces and our capital was moved 3 times. After all, the United States and the Soviet Union helped us to rose to change the war.
Thank you, Mr. Xiang PP.
Good morning, Mr. Vladimir Cherbachev. Would you please tell us how was Russia, or the Soviet Union as it was called back then, involved in the Second Sino-Japanese War?
Good morning. The Soviet Union was giving China military aid.
Were the Japanese afraid or concerned about your involvement in the war?
There were different opinions. There were people who were afraid of us going through the border and taking Manchukuo out of their hands. Manchukuo out of their hands, but then there was also other people who believed that China was the main objective.
What was the views of the League of Nations on this topic?
Well, the League of Nations was conformed of all anti-communist states except for us. The back then called Soviet Union, so they were never very supportive for our ideas.
Why was the Soviet Union helping so much China?
Well, you see, if the Soviet Union helped China, it will weaken the Japanese army, which will later make it easier for us to beat Japanese army, which was already hit by the Chinese army.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Koshitori Shaikotimio, Japanese Navy veteran. Would you please let us know why did Japan try to conquer?
Well, you see, our nation, Japan, is not very big, and those times our population was starting to grow exponentially. We didn't have enough space to grow the food and everything we needed, and we were developing every minute into a bigger and better army. So we had the opportunity to grow and give our people what they needed and deserved.
What were the greatest fights you had during the war?
Well, there were various fights, but the ones I can remember now and the most important were the Marco Polo Bridge incident and the taking over Machupo.
What was the major difficulties of the war?
There were several difficulties in the war, but since Japan was getting so strong and the other world powers were seeing how strong Japan was getting, they joined forces against us and ended up defeating us, since we were not only fighting against China, but we ended up fighting against Germany, USA, and the Soviet Union too.
What was the aftermath of the war as a whole?
As I told you, things started to be very difficult to Japan, so we finally lost the war and had to retreat, defeated back to our country.
Thank you, Mr.